Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in just 1 minute at the top of the hour. Okay, I have top of the hour on my clock, so I think we'll get started, everyone. Welcome to the Globe Virtual Webinar, How to Keep Your Sustainability Programming Alive in a Pandemic. I'll introduce myself. I'm Ted Ferguson. I am president of the Delphi Group. And for those of you new to our Globe and Delphi constellation, I'll just explain it for a moment. Delphi is a part of a constellation of organizations that include Globe Series, the host of this webinar, the Excel Partnership, and Leading Change. And we all share the same vision: to achieve a sustainable, prosperous, and socially just future in a generation. Now, Delphi's mission, which contributes to that vision, is to transform the way leading organizations generate value to make our world better. As you can imagine, we feel as though that mission is more important than ever in today's context. So a bit of context on why we're here today, what we're talking about, what our objectives are. But first, a warning. During these pandemic times, I've been listening to and watching a lot of Brene Brown. And I'm learning all about being both courageous and vulnerable. Or I think it's vulnerable first, and that makes you more courageous. And when I was thinking about it today in this webinar, it's extremely relevant to what we're doing today. And that is because these are uncertain times. We don't have a clear blueprint for the next 2 months, the next 2 weeks, the next 2 years. So we're all trying to be courageous, while we at the same time are without a doubt feeling vulnerable, myself included. But that theme of courage and being courageous is what I'm so excited about today. People we have here as speakers are an amazing collection of what I would say are courageous people leading courageous organizations that in many ways, shape, and form are providing essential services, absolutely critical products at a time of a pandemic. And today we get to hear about how their organizations are still pushing ahead on sustainability. And that's a pretty great thing to be able to get inspired by. So I'm going to introduce the speakers in just one moment. But first, a little more on the background for what got us here to today. So Delphi, we work on sustainability projects and with clients and deep expertise in this field. We're excited by it. January, February of this year was one of the most exciting couple months on sustainability in 20 years, in my opinion. We'd seen companies adopting long-term targets, big ambitious targets on sustainability. Never seen progress like this before in my time. And then a pandemic hits. And we think, oh my gosh, I feel very vulnerable. How do we proceed as it relates to these critical sustainability priorities? So what we're dealing with now is a new reality, and we're trying to find our way through it. What's clear from the last few months is the role of companies in society has never been more clear. Essential services, corporate social purpose, corporate responsibility is now coming into focus in a way that it never was before. We're seeing early data results showing companies with strong ESG or sustainability programs and strategies in place are getting hit less hard in the market, in the financial markets. Now that's less hard, but still not a great situation. But stakeholders are seeing companies with strong sustainability practices as resilient. And that's what we need today is resilience. People's connecting of COVID to other issues and just a sense of connectivity is more visceral than ever before. And we're starting to see the data from surveys where people are proving the theory that the notion that society's expectations of companies is getting much broader during this time and will continue to be. And of course, we're seeing these gorgeous high definition pictures of the planet that have been, marred by smog and other kind of pollutants. And it's just a lot to take in. So you feel vulnerable, but we know we need to be courageous. So how are our sustainability strategies moving forward while we're still in the crosshairs of this pandemic? This is what we're going to talk about today. Now I want to introduce our speakers. First of all, from across the pond, the UK, and showing us something outside of a North American reality is Adam Garfunkel, owner and managing director of Junxion. He's an experienced sustainability consultant, writer, and activist. He spent more than a quarter century helping organizations plan and deliver effective strategies. And he continues to work with companies, helping them become B Corps. Imagine a company trying to become a benefit corporation right now, trying to decide, it's so critical that I figure out this part of my business, but I got immediate needs, but I want to look forward and say, what's my role in society as a company? And Adam helps major corporations with those kind of considerations. Now for Team Canada, we have three of Canada's leading companies on corporate sustainability, all providing essential services right now. Candace Laing, Vice President, Sustainability and Stakeholder Relations from Nutrien. Candace is currently, as I said, Vice President, Sustainability with Nutrien. So this is the world's largest provider of crop inputs and services. Imagine the responsibility on that company and Candace in her role right now. She's here to tell us about, in the middle of all this, producing an ESG report. Janet Drysdale, Vice President of Financial Planning at CN. She's been in this role since 2018 at CN with many more others before that in the same company. Her responsibilities include financial management, strategic planning, and oversight of the company's operating and capital budgets. And we just are so impressed with CN that sustainability is part of that lexicon now as well. So welcome, Janet. And you just think CN, it's been really crisis to crisis for CN, and this company is showing how to be resilient and courageous during a crazy year. And we get to hear straight from Janet how they're keeping sustainability a priority. And lastly, Shilpa Tiwari from Manulife. She's the head of sustainability and corporate citizenship. Manulife, many of you will know, but in case you don't, Canadian multinational insurance company and financial services provider headquartered in Toronto. And Shilpa oversees a team responsible for the enterprise-wide sustainability strategy, disclosures, and ESG integration. So we've got three companies who are functioning in uncertain times, but are providing incredible services, leadership, and these individuals are helping to create that. Plus Adam, who's advising multiple organizations and is going to provide us a perspective from, as I said, across the pond. So now a few housekeeping matters. Okay, in terms of the WebEx interface, we're all getting comfortable with so many different interfaces, but just a bit on this one. You might be seeing us very small at the top of your screen at the moment. There's lots of different views available. Just hover over the top bar hand side of your, the right hand side of your screen to toggle the view between the PowerPoint and our faces. We'll be having a dialogue for the first 30 or 40 minutes with 3 overarching discussion questions that'll be up on the slide deck, and then we'll get to your Q&A. So please, the chat and your Q&A, we'll aim to answer as many questions as possible in the second half. If you're not seeing the chat in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, click the chat button at the bottom of the screen to pop it open. Make sure you're sending your chat messages to all participants. If you're sending them just to me, there's a pretty good chance I am not going to see them in the next few minutes. We have a great support staff who are going to get through all the questions and put forth as many as we can. If you're having any tech issues, add your questions into the chat to all participants, and our tech support will help you out. You can also tweet your questions to us using the hashtag at the bottom of the screen, And of course, you can chat with each other and share your tips and experience in our open forum. So with that, I'm going to get to our first question, and I'll direct it to our different panelists, and we'll go that route and hear from them all before we move on to the next one. So I'll be going to Shilpa for this first one, followed by Candace, and then Adam. So our first question, how are you ensuring your sustainability and climate efforts and your related initiatives, how do they continue to flourish? How do you keep moving them forward in light of this pandemic? What are the challenges you've faced in this new reality, and how are you overcoming them? So over to you, Shilpa.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all of you for taking time to participate today. So as we all are aware, sustainability is about the long term, but we have really shifted gears while we stay laser focused on some of our long-term objectives around environment and diversity and inclusion. We've also switched now to the short term, and our sustainability strategy consists of 4 pillars: environment, people, communities, customers, and clients. And so in this pandemic, we've really leaned into our 3 pillars: people, customers, and communities, to address some of the short-term impacts of what's happening currently. And in that, we've looked at how can we support those 3 stakeholder groups, or whatever falls in those 3 pillars. And I mean, we've always had a long-term focus on mental health, financial health, but now really looking at short-term and how to respond to some of the short-term needs of our customers, employees, and clients. We've looked at our benefits and services we provide to customers, and looked at how we can adapt them or change them or evolve them so that we're responsive to what our customers and clients are experiencing currently. With our employees, really communicated the importance of their mental health and well-being, and supporting them through that challenge by providing various services and letting, having the senior leadership speak about flexibility, self-care versus as we take care of our community and family. And then with our communities, we've made a commitment around food access and distribution. And in terms of D&I, that's an important, for me, it has always been very, very important in my career to push that forward in any way. And while D&I is our long term, in the short term, things like this can bring people together, but it can also be divisive. And so we've really focused on elevating our D&I and talking about how we are one world, we are one global community, we are in this together, and we will get out of this together by the various actions that we are taking and the various initiatives we're supporting. We supported the Global Citizens One World Together home concert, which was about keeping distance and social distancing, but also coming together as a community from our homes. So those have been some of the key things in our sustainability that have been present, but we've really used this to elevate those aspects of our sustainability. Some of the challenges are there are things that we need to maintain. Like we are working on our sustainability report. We need to stay laser focused on our sustainability report. Climate change is still very, very important. And so some of the challenges have been just balancing the short-term immediate needs of things connected to our sustainability strategy and not letting go of the long-term, and understanding that some of these short-terms might actually become more long-term as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Shilpa. Over to you, Candace. How are you approaching this at Nutrien?
Thanks, Ted. And as you mentioned, we managed to still launch a new ESG report on April 9th in the midst of figuring out quickly how we would continue to operate as an essential service. And that's really important, because if we don't have the ability to safely operate and provide our farmers what they need, literally, I mean, the concern is what's on the grocery shelves post-harvest 2020. So it was a heavy lift figuring out, how are we going to run safely from producing the inputs to working with growers in the field and making sure we have a good crop season, all while we're transitioning more than 5,000 of our more corporate employees to working from home and getting lots of input and collaboration to get our ESG report over the line, and which we did. And just to share, it wasn't even a conversation. My breath maybe for half a second going, can we still do this? Can we get this out? And it wasn't even a discussion, because I think, it's really exciting to see the ESG conversation so elevated now and integrated in business that it's just part of what we do. It's no longer, sustainability and ESG on the side and can be put on the shelf. We live it, we breathe it. And I think part of what my thought process has been through this crisis is, initially, I too had the question of what will this mean for sustainability? But to just pick up on what you said, Ted, it almost has made it more important than ever, because I think there's such a link. A COVID response is now going to be kind of a focus of being an ESG topic, that how we're responding, what is the human capital management process? Are we looking at how that helps business continuity and address long-term risks? What kind of decisions is a company making right now in how you're handling your suppliers and having that resiliency in your supply chain? These are ESG questions. They're not COVID response and then ESG is on the side. Mm-hmm. There's really ESG lens to a COVID response. And I think we'll see this as we have our questions later this year, probably from investors, that it'll be quite a pertinent ESG topic, from emergency management to human capital management and supply chain management. So I think we'll just see this elevation in the ESG lens. Some of the challenges, because we have kept our focus on ESG, not only from our report and disclosures, but really trying to develop a new ambitious climate strategy. One of the initial challenges was just the lift of these things being on top of each other and layered in quickly, an additional focus. So bandwidth has been one challenge, but then also just some of the acute needs that we know are there in our food supply chain, but really working with growers right now in different regions in the world who have crops that have nowhere to go. And what do we do about that? Because I think it just sheds light on how we need to work on the resiliency in our food supply chain, because it is very sensitive to shock. So that has been one of the challenges, is if you're not prepared for those things in advance, it's very hard to pivot on quickly. But we continue, actually, as I said, to focus on ESG and climate, because it's just part of an ESG focus now, and now COVID and emergency response is just elevated in our ESG realm, I think. Thanks, Ted.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Candace. Appreciate that. Over to you, Janet. How are you and CN moving forward?
Thanks, Ted. It's great to connect with everybody today. I'm so happy to be able to do that virtually in this very unusual time. As Ted mentioned, I am Vice President of Financial Planning, and yet I have direct accountability for sustainability. I have an excellent and passionate team that is truly fulfilling a center of excellence role within CN. And while it's perhaps an unusual home for sustainability, my view is that it is a signal that we've hit a tipping point in our efforts to integrate sustainability into our business model, our strategy, and importantly, our allocation of capital. So maybe just a couple quick words about CN. We are a North American transportation company. We link the three coasts of North America, and we connect global markets through key port gateways to importers, exporters, and ultimately consumers. CN's a backbone of the economy, an enabler of trade, and an essential service in this current pandemic. So we are very much focused right now on how to continue our operations, how to ensure our employee health and safety. And like, Candace and Shilpa were mentioning, there are a lot of people at CN who have been able to pivot very quickly to a work from home environment. But obviously not everybody can do that. We have locomotive engineers and conductors that need to be inside the locomotive cab. We have employees that need to work in the yards and the shops to maintain our services. And so the focus really has been on those employees. And, we've even set up our own global supply chain in order to make sure that we're able to supply our employees with the proper protective equipment, cleaning supplies. We have production lines, if you can believe it, that we've set up in some of our yard facilities and have created distribution centers to make sure that those frontline employees really have the things that they require in order to keep them safe. Now, in the current context, and as a business that is very much connected to the economy, we are also experiencing the reality of the economic shock that the pandemic is causing on really most companies. And so there is also an intense focus on cost control, which actually is helping us on at least some aspects of our sustainability agenda, including fuel efficiency. So at CN, our climate strategy and our carbon strategy is very much tied to fuel efficiency and the fuel efficiency of the locomotive. And so that strong alignment between the operations model and the sustainability agenda is proving even more material in the current context. So we are able to get that buy-in and to push that lever even harder in the current context. Now, that's not to say we aren't also having some challenges. I think the two key challenges I would highlight is one, the current strain on the employee base. Yeah. And we are all adapting, to a new and more challenging reality. With my own team, I'm finding that workloads are higher, stress loads are higher. So it's really about, how do we support and manage through that? How do we make that extra effort to connect with employees, to prioritize mental health and to do the right things? The second challenge is not anything new. It's the challenge we all face, and that's really balancing the short term with the longer term. Yeah. I think it's exacerbated in the current context because there is so much pressure and the shock to the economy is so significant. So that's something that I think we just have to work extra hard at, in our collective roles on the sustainability agenda to push the organization to see through past the short term and how to think about pivoting out of the issue and somehow coming out ahead is really the ultimate goal here.
Yeah, excellent point. Yeah, you guys it's great. Have the different perspectives, but you're all hitting different dimensions of what we need to be doing. Adam, last but not least on this question, from the UK with more of a European view to it, how would you respond to this query?
Yeah, well, I'm super impressed to hear the stories that the three business leaders you have on the panel with me today have been telling about how they are keeping sustainability efforts going. I kind of think they illustrate what I've been hearing and seeing over here in Europe, which is that there's a real sense that the future is here. There's a sense that now is the time when some of the things that sustainability professionals have been talking about are just a little bit more obvious, a little bit clearer, a little bit more front and center. And I certainly think, therefore, that there's an opportunity for sustainability professionals to be making the case to their senior managers. I mean, these three fantastic people are clearly in good organizations that are listening to them already. But I do speak to sustainability professionals in perhaps in organizations that aren't so mature, and they struggle to get the ear of senior management. And I think now is the time when they should be bashing down that door and saying, you know what, we're going to be judged by how we show up in this crisis, and
Yes.
I've got loads of ideas.
Yeah.
Because any sound sustainability professional is outward-facing, is engaged with stakeholders, is thinking about the long term, and I think those are really some of the requirements that businesses need to be able to demonstrate that they get right now. So I think it's a huge opportunity for sustainability professionals, and I think there's lots that can be done. The challenge is, of course, the balance, as people have said already. You'll probably have had to pivot away from some of the initiatives you had in place and pivot towards some of the certainly employee-focused, community-focused challenges that businesses will be facing, without losing sight of some of the longer-term efforts and ambitions, particularly around climate. So I totally get that the balance is tough, but in terms of kind of key messages that you can land with senior management, I mean, it's a great opportunity right now.
Right. Excellent. Thank you very much, and thank you. And I mean, without a doubt, it shows that same vulnerability, the unknown, uncertainty, the intense stress, but then the courage of saying we have to find a strong path for our organizations and their role in the community and the environment as it relates to this moment in time. So thank you. Question number 2. And Adam, you provided a great segue to it, maybe unknowingly, but opportunity. It's hard to think about opportunity while we have so much risk in front of us right now. The way this issue is pushing organizations, it's creating new nodes of thinking, of operational excellence, of connectivity with value chain, supply chain, like was mentioned. So let's try and come up with some examples, or we've asked the panelists to share some examples of an opportunity. And Adam, the segue was actually perfect because you're up first, and then I'll go to Shilpa, Candace, and Janet. But maybe you can just elaborate on what you were saying a moment ago, Adam. Is how would you define that further? How can you find an opportunity in this pandemic?
Right. Thank you, Ted. Yeah, I do think that there are some, today challenges, some real people challenges, and we shouldn't ignore those, right? That's the last thing I'm suggesting here. There's absolutely people are not experiencing this in the same way. There are some groups in society who are, or in our own companies perhaps, who are finding this much more challenging than others. And I think we have to acknowledge that at the beginning of this conversation about opportunities. But as I say, I think there are opportunities because basically what's on show here are companies' values. You can't hide right now. How you're showing up in this crisis is telling people a lot about what you value as a business. And so I think you can lean into that. I think that's where the opportunity is. You can lean into the sense of frankly, of emotion that we all have around this experience, around the fact that there's a sort of an idea that we all have a little glimpse of, that none of us is safe until all of us are safe. This sense of interdependence that I don't think has been as obvious to as many people perhaps outside our little sustainability bubble as we might have liked in the past. And I think that's really where the opportunity lies. So bring that down to an individual business. It's a great opportunity to explore those values. Are they the right ones? Should we reflect on them? Have we turned up in the right way? To your point about showing appropriate professional vulnerability, Ted, perhaps senior leaders should be standing up and saying, we didn't quite get this right. How can we do this better? Yeah. And I think in that spirit, you can engage employees and look at key facets of your business, like what's our purpose? Why are we here? What is it that we should be doing? How should we show up in society? I think it creates the opportunity, the platform for those conversations that perhaps have been more difficult to have in some businesses in more normal times. Yeah. So I think that's really where the opportunity lies in particular.
Excellent. Thank you. Shilpa, over to you. Where do you find an opportunity in this?
I think some of what I would say echoes what Adam has just spoken to. again, like he said, I mean, this has impacted people in different ways, and for some people and communities, they haven't been able to identify opportunity, and it may be a while before they can see that. But in terms of our corporation and opportunities, it's really pushed us to lean into the social side of our mission. Our mission is decisions made easier, lives made better. And we have 6 values, and 2 of them are share your humanity and do the right thing. And they're lovely values. We see them on walls in the organization, but this experience has really pushed us to lean into them and bring those to life in a really meaningful way. Also, I mean, in terms of opportunity, as Janet was mentioning, workloads are more, stress levels are higher, and I'm seeing silos in terms of how the organization was functioning are starting to come down because workloads are higher, stresses are higher, when there's so much on everyone's plate, we've had to collaborate in a much different way, in a much more meaningful way and thoughtful way. It's interesting because there are teams in our department that I've never worked with, and now we've just had to work together and learn about what each other is doing and leveraging each other's strengths in the various departments. It's also for us at Manulife pushed us, we have ambitions around being a digital leader, and it's really pushed us forward in that respect as well. And the working from home to move entire workload, not an entire, but a significant portion of our workforce to a work from home situation has also just pushed us to think differently and work differently. Yeah. There are a number of those of opportunities around that. And then, I mean, I think with the D&I is just something that is very important for me. And I think
and just for everybody here, it's diversity and inclusion.
Sorry, yes, diversity and inclusion. And so for us, I mean, the opportunity was also to really put that lens on what we were seeing and how we would respond and how we would always stress we are a community that really should we're in this together, we'll come out of this together. And then finally, another point Adam made was I think that, we all know our world is connected and the ecosystems are interconnected. But this experience has really brought it forward, to the forefront, how sensitive, how fragile, and how connected our ecosystems are. I would have loved for all of what we're experiencing around climate change to bring that forward, but this pandemic has really, really brought it to the forefront for many people and groups that may not be as connected to what's happening around climate. So I'm hoping that we come out of this as a more thoughtful community, global community, more connected community, and more open to innovation and really different ways of thinking about how we approach a problem and get to a solution.
Yeah, very well said, Shilpa. Thank you. Very well said. Candace, what's your perspective on finding opportunity in this?
Looking for the silver lining in a tough situation, absolutely. I'll pick up on a couple of things Adam said, because especially if people are in organizations that maybe sustainability isn't as integrated and part of your DNA, one of my hopes out of this situation, and I think it's early days, but I hope I see more of the light being shone and the data supporting the fact that companies with good sustainability and ESG performance have fared better through this crisis. I think that is a huge opportunity to really move the needle and the agenda forward. So that's one of my kind of hope/opportunities coming out of this. Thought related to our business and our sector and agriculture. There's a couple things. Leading into next year is a huge focus on food system transformation. Globally, a big deal. And having something like a COP or a Paris equivalent meeting for food and so leading up to that work and that discussion, it was a concern of mine that, we're very focused on human health and environmental impacts around the food and agricultural system, but I don't believe we were going into that discussion with a really solid understanding of the food and agricultural supply chain. And I believe this crisis, and I know it is because I'm in these conversations, but it's just educating us, and we're aware that we need to leverage this experience and take those learnings and insights forward into that focus on food system transformation. So that is something I'm really excited about, because I strongly believe we can mess up the SDGs if we whack-a-mole them. That's Candace language, sorry, but because we're so passionate about solutions that we come in quickly on them sometimes without fully working through the unintended consequences. And the sensitivities in agricultural productivity and food supply definitely need to be accounted for as we solve for the SDGs. And so now I think actually we have a shot at doing that in addressing climate and food supply, because those have to go together.
Yeah, the awareness.
Yeah. And then just practically speaking, one of the really exciting things is one of our big aims, strategy-wise as a company, is to digitize the sector. Agriculture is practically the last industry to go digital, and that's what we're doing globally. And with social distancing now in farming this spring, we're just seeing more people getting used to and comfortable putting that order in, on a smart device as opposed to that face-to-face interaction. What that means is, as we transition and digitize the industry, we will be able to track sustainability outcomes at the field level and, measure and actually move the needle on those factors at the field level with growers around the globe. So that's just a really exciting kind of piece that'll be accelerated by the crisis.
Advanced by it. Yeah, great examples. Okay, Janet, how about you at CN, and where do you find the silver lining? Where do you see opportunity, be it short-term, medium, long-term? What's your perspective on that?
Look, I think this is a tremendous opportunity for all of us to learn, and it's an opportunity to educate. I think we're in the very early innings here. So I think this is the beginning. We all feel like we've been in social isolation for months already. It hasn't been that long. And there's a lot of roadway in front of us before we actually have a vaccine and we have a more clear return to what I'll call normal. Although I don't think we ever really do that. I think there's a new normal coming. So I think there's still a lot of assessment to be done on what companies are doing, how they are performing, and that assessment can't fully be made, my guess, for at least another 12, maybe 18 months. So I think we have to be patient in terms of understanding how this evolves. I think even the best companies are not going to do everything perfectly. And I think we have to have the humility to be able to look back and say, what did we learn and how would we do better? I think there are so many parallels between what we're seeing in the pandemic with the climate change agenda. And I know Shilpa touched on this as well, but this is about resiliency and it's about risk. And to me, from a corporate strategy point of view, those are two lenses that we can be applying to the current situation and try and help the organizations understand how do we apply that to the climate change lens. And how do we do that in a way that's meaningful with a sense of urgency, even if we feel like, the pandemic hit us, immediately. Nobody really saw this coming and it was upon us before we could see it. We can't let, a little bit of that ability to see something coming, but not be on our doorstep as a reason not to act with that sense of urgency. So I think there's lots of lessons to be learned. I think the pandemic is really reframing our thinking on the right of the individual versus the collective. This is a real life case study in achieving the greater good. And I think it would be a mistake to underestimate the lasting impacts of the experience that we're all living through. And really my hope is just that we can take lessons that we are learning and that we're going to learn and really apply that to the climate change agenda.
Yeah, excellent. Great way of putting it. And people, you have a dream and you're thinking you're dreaming of what's actually happening, and you think, wow, that's a theoretical, kind of dreaming, or you read the headlines and you think it sounds like an academic question. It's not. It's what people are dealing with on a day-to-day. It's a reality right now, and that's hard to take. But at the same time, along the lines of what you guys are saying, we find ways to manage through this, and we find ways to optimize things and find opportunities and try and act on those. And that's the blueprint that none of us have in front of us yet. So in that regard, we're going to go to the last question and then open it up and get into some of the Q&As. And we originally asked the speakers for 3 examples. I'm going to instead edit that to ask you for 1 example so that we save enough time for the Q&A. Let's say you had to think of 1 action. Now you can pick from the 3. But really, you all have to show up. Our 4 people here speaking to the wider group today, they have to show up as leaders. You're an individual. You have to show up as a leader. You have to enter into brave conversations you haven't had before with, again, you don't have the same roadmap that empowered your statements, your arguments, your suggestions as it did before. And so if you think about all the people who are on this webinar, they're looking for ideas, inspiration, examples. What's an action that you would suggest to somebody in their organization? What could they be doing right now that might feel hard to do, but is absolutely imperative to do right now? And then for first on that one, I will go to Janet, who just finished off. So we're keeping everybody warm. Go right to the person who's finished. Janet, over to you.
Okay.
1 action.
You're making me pick one, Ted. So the one I'm going to pick is treat your employees as your most critical asset.
Yeah.
And even if that's hard to do in the context of the overall organization, do it at least for your team. Show the example. Your employees truly are the most important piece of what you have in your organization.
Excellent. Thank you, Janet. Candace, if you were to pick one, what would you focus on?
Yeah, I'm going to build on Janet's, and that's where our organization started. Is how do we run safely and put the practices in? And it was a tough, heavy kind of couple days where we went, okay, but we have to build in. I would say this is from an ESG perspective. Also, how are we treating our suppliers and our communities, because we need them there at the end of this crisis. And it's a heavy discussion because I think we all feel we have to worry about how we're going to get through this, but shifting the crisis to the long-term focus is getting through this means those suppliers are there when we come out of this, our communities are healthy when we come out of this. So taking that lens to the current situation, it's hard, but I can tell you from our company's experience, once you go through it, the engagement from employees that we did that work, the supplier focus and community focus, it pays so many dividends, but it's a heavy conversation for sure in light of the pressures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point. Adam, and then Shilpa. Adam, what would you think?
Yeah, I'm going to build on a point I raised earlier about difficult conversations. I think it's now's the time to start that conversation. You don't have to finish it. There's plenty of enormous stuff to deal with right now. But take the opportunity to start that difficult conversation and to throw it out there to people, in senior management, to say, look, we're doing all this great work. We're helping our people. We're helping our suppliers. What's going to be different? What are we going to show? How are we going to show up that we've changed after this? What does that actually look like? And how do we evidence that change? What is it about what we measure and call our impact or the difference we make in the world? What it is about our governance systems that are going to be different? How are we going to genuinely evidence that we've learned something from this and are in a different place now? That's the conversation I think sustainability leaders should be starting.
Great, thank you. And Shilpa, you had more time to pick one from your three.
I think Janet's what her comment that employees are one of your most crucial assets, and recognizing that through this time would have been my one, because she said that. I will say also communicate. Communicate. It is so important to communicate authentically and transparently right now. And I think every leader, and everyone is really a leader in your organization. We should all feel that we're leaders, irrespective of what your role is. We should all really work to communicate as authentically and transparently as possible. So yeah, that would be an action I think we should consider or really elevate.
Yeah, excellent. And we're seeing a lot of emphasis on that, and that's a great point. Okay, I've got some great questions coming in on the chat, and I want to focus the first one, and it's probably most pertinent to Candace and Janet, and it's related to supply chains. But if the other two panelists have a perspective, I'll open it up to you as well. And it's really a question around, how are these times, you guys, your organizations are deeply involved in such a variety of supply chains, both your value chain, you're in the middle of the supply chain, you're at different ends of it, your customers are. How is sustainability considerations? There's this urgency in the supply chain right now. How are you seeing some of the sustainability considerations that have been associated with the supply chain, the urgency of issues affecting the supply chain now? How is that showing up in your organization? And if it's, you can speak broadly, or if you have one example of the stress on the supply chain and its relation to sustainability, that would be good. But just how do you think of that in given your organizations are so intertwined into a global value chain, global supply chain? So I'll ask Candace first. When you're thinking the agricultural supply chain, what's the approach? What's the priority? How does sustainability still factor in?
Yeah, well, at the biggest scale, efforts to keep supply chains open, flowing, green lanes, that is all happening, and that's a big part of it. Getting down into, I think, some of the shocks in the system, it's apparent to me, so many people don't understand the supply chain. So if you have a farmer right now who has to bury a crop of onions, are you angry at the farmer? Or do you not understand what happens when restaurants close? Even though we're doing our best and we have great efforts actually to connect with our partner food banks to get that food someplace, it all works, and we need to really understand how it works and what happens when it doesn't. So those are some of the challenges, but again, I think the awareness will come out of this experience. The other thing that I'm seeing a lot of discussion and appreciation for is, while we've been saying it, and coming back to Shilpa's point around the diversity and inclusion aspect, D&I in our supply chain, we've been, promoting for a long time, but I don't know that it really resonates, but it's showing up now. Because I see supply chains that are more diverse are responding better, more agility, quicker to adapt and pivot. I think we've seen some good examples of manufacturing. So having that diversity in our businesses and supply chains is finally I think, having its time, and that's really exciting.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. And how about you, Janet, for CN? I mean, you guys see all sides of the supply chain and value chains, and what's the perspective that you would bring in terms of the pressure?
I think this is just a tremendous educational opportunity. I think people generally don't spend time thinking about globalization and the interconnectedness of supply chains. But we are truly connected as a globe. I think people are increasingly aware of that as we're working through this. Candace mentioned, supply chains do well when things are predictable. And, disruptions and shocks to the system, and the fact that this really started in China and was layered onto their Chinese New Year. I mean, the volumes, for example, coming into Canada through West Coast ports have been extremely volatile. And,
right.
As China reopens its economy and wants to start shipping goods to North America, we're in the midst of closing our economy. So I think Candace's point is right on about diversity and risk management. And I think we're going to see more of that going forward, more eggs in different baskets, if you will. People aren't going to want to have, single suppliers or be connected to a single supply chain. And I think, Candace's points around food security are hugely relevant. And I think this is, again, an opportunity to drive that educational aspect of where does food come from and what's required to produce food. And how do we balance some of those localized supply chains and the priority of localized supply chains in a world that has focused on globalization for the past 25 years?
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking from CN, who's has been right in the middle of grain shipments and all these issues over the last few years, I'll put it in a different perspective. Shilpa or Adam, any opinions on the supply chain question and sustainability and how those still are very real right now?
Well, I've just got a little observation or example. I noted that Danone have pledged $250 million to support 15,000 small businesses, which is an interesting perspective, a long-term perspective from them about effectively, when the times are good, you support and you work and all goes well, and when times are bad, you don't withdraw that support, right? You build that resilience and that sort of that social capital into your supply chain by extending that hand in that way. So just an interesting example from Danone.
And Shilpa, anything from your point of view?
I think all the panelists have provided a really interesting perspective. For us, we have we've realized the need to put more focus on our supply chain from an ESG perspective. It hasn't been as much of a focus. The ESG aspect of it and the diversity and D&I aspect or diversity inclusion aspect haven't been a focus until very recently. And so that's exciting and encouraging for me is that we have been engaging with our procurement teams much more frequently and much more regularly in the last few months because of this. So it's really initiated a lot of conversations that have been a little bit later to come to the table. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the next question is about ESG or sustainability, information, data, and continuing that effort in this time. So to frame it, we're seeing evidence that financial institutions are continuing to expect data as it relates to sustainability performance, environment, social, governance, impact areas, operational data, carbon footprints, all these kind of considerations. And that's only going to be heightened if this association, this correlation between strong ESG performance and greater resiliency during this pandemic, if that's being realized by an increasing number of financial institutions. So while your company is focused on reacting and responding to this pandemic, I'll go to you first on this, Candace, but I'm sure the rest of you will have a view. How do you keep some of these basic fundamental pieces to a strong sustainability strategy? How do you keep them moving? How do you keep the data? How do you keep the teams engaged? How do you continue the systems that have supported robust sustainability programs? How do you keep them going? right off the example of a recent ESG report. So, Candace, how did you balance it?
Well, I think I'm feeling okay about this one because we haven't really, run into nor do we foresee really any challenges with this, except for Susan's question in the chat is giving me pause because I think it was a really good one. We have a level of assurance on our scope 1 and 2 emissions inventory, and I just thought based on her question, we actually had those site visits for that work happen pre-COVID, but how would we handle that now? So, I mean, it's a great question in terms of our systems and data we get from operations and our sites, and I think we're those of us that are working from home, or we can still connect because in the last probably year or two, we put a lot of systems in place and aren't manual anymore. So I wasn't worried until Susan's question, actually, Ted. So thank you. I have that to take away and ponder because we have obviously more assurance work to do this year. So not much of an answer there.
For the importance of these webinars, it's very interactive. Even the panelists benefit. Yeah, so the point is like just the logistics, so the question was around just the logistics of getting data, engaging different team members, being out in the field, in operations, in different, especially as we go further into, broader scope 3, broader value chain data considerations for your ESG performance, it gets more complicated. So, Shilpa, can I go to you next, and then I'll go to Janet and Adam.
Well, I think it'll be interesting, and I also saw Susan's question, and I was thinking the same thing. I mean, and I don't know quite right now how we're going to address it, but it will be interesting to compare what we see moving forward, and because I think. I mean, we're having this conversation with someone else in the company. A lot of data, not just the GHG, but looking at demographic data will be very, very different. Birth rates and death rates, and so I don't have an answer really, or a really clear thought to share right now. But I am going to be very, very interested to see how we explain and understand. What has happened moving forward.
Yeah, a big question has been in our work has been, does the rhythm of reporting need to remain the same? Are there reasons to extend it? What elements? And before this pandemic, we were seeing a convergence of financial reporting with sustainability reporting, and the timelines were getting more rigid, and the specific different nodes of reporting where the demand was higher. And so that required an increasingly robust system to allow it to function. And that's going to be a challenge right now. Janet, do you have a perspective on
this? So that's number one. We know that the pressure for more disclosure, verified disclosure, transparency, this is not going away. I mean, CN is very fortunate in the sense we have a very long-term focused investor base, which means when it comes to sustainability and ESG issues, they are asking the executives all the right questions, and that pressure is not going to change. I would say, as a company that's going to report our Q1 financials next week, the reporting process on the financials has also been new this time. All of our accounting team is working from home. SOX controls that we might have done, in person have had to adapt and change to the new reality. So there's no question in my mind that some of this is going to change. But if we can do it and report on our hardcore financials, if you will, there's no reason we can't adapt on the ESG metrics that we're reporting on. And I want to come back to something that Candace said, with respect to kind of the digitizing the business, because there is probably one area, Candace, that's maybe a little bit behind agriculture, which may be railroading, is when it comes to technology. But we are focused on it. And that's another opportunity that is being created by the current situation. That's one area that's being accelerated. And so when you're thinking about, your data collection and your processes, this is a great opportunity to be thinking about how do I build in the technology aspect, the robust process so that it's not a spreadsheet type of work, it's connected to systems, and that you're building it from the ground up. Or for those of us who have more of the data already, a longer history of that data collection, how do we make it more automated, easier to manipulate, but the reporting's not going away. So we definitely have to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, do you have 30 seconds on this? Because I need to wrap up, but I want to give you the 30 seconds on this question.
Yeah, I think when it comes to reporting, I would say you've got to do the best you can. You've got to provide commentary around whatever failings you've had in your data collection system and what you're going to do about it. And I think if that's clear and authentic, then I think people are going to understand it.
Yeah, this is about transparency. So absolutely, and that perfect. Again, bring it back to be okay being vulnerable, and it's also courageous disclosures, courageous statements from companies, and it's going to go a long way right now. So thank you so much to all four of our panelists today. What an amazing, rich perspective on the issues we're dealing with. So to wrap up, we'll be sharing the recording of this. Key takeaways and resources will all be available and be sent around by email. Unanswered questions from the chat in that email will be considered. If you have additional questions and you haven't had a chance to ask them yet, you can send them to us at #GlobeVirtual on Twitter, and we'll get into that discussion. The next Globe Virtual is Advancing the Circular Economy in Canada, and that's going to be on May 14th. So it's going to be building out on the outcomes. We had a Globe Advance from Globe Forum in February focused on action for the circular economy, and that's where we're going to look at the results and the outcomes. So keep your eyes out for that, and there'll be ones beyond that in terms of specific industry dialogues and matchmaking, all through Globe Virtual. So thank you all for your time today. Please stay safe, stay hopeful, and beyond all, stay sustainable. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.